begin. This is September 7th, 1994, and you are
Theodora Andrea Schubert Duncan.
And let's see. I guess we'll just start from the beginning. When were you born?
I was born the 1st of January, 1919.
So you're a New Year's baby.
I'm a New Year's baby.
And so what was going on with your parents when you were born?
Well, my father was already dead. He was deceased in November of 1918, and I was born January the 1st, 1919. He was a young man. He was only 28 years old, and he died of the flu epidemic after the First World War in New Orleans. People just died like flies. You could hardly get anybody to inter somebody or bury him. And he had a sister who was only 26, Eva. She was the youngest child of Grandpa Schlosser's children. She was my mother's younger sister, and she was married to a Dr. Dubas. They lived 4 blocks away. And when they found out that my father had passed on, his brother left walking the 4 blocks to their house to tell them that Teddy, as they called my father, had passed on, and she was dying right at that moment. She was like 26.
So you had a sister that died at the same time?
My mother's sister.
Oh, your mother's sister.
My mother's 26-year-old sister. And those were tragic times.
So what was your father's name?
His name was Theodore Andrew Schubert. And his father was Theodore Stonewall Schubert. Now his father lived in New Orleans, and he was one of his first jobs. He was used to call salesmen drummers, and he was a candy drummer. In other words, he went around and he peddled or sold candy, but in big quantities. And then later on, he was a clerk in a bank, just a teller in a bank. And he died long before I got to really know him. I mean, I have some pictures of him. But
so he lived on after your dad died.
Oh yes, oh yes.
And
my father's mother had 2 sons and 2 daughters. 3 daughters. Aunt Coralie, Aunt Lillian, and Aunt Edna. And she lived a very sad life because she lived to bury all of her children.
Really?
Yeah.
What was her name?
Let's see, you're pressing me hard for that. She was grandma to me, I don't know. And then she died.
And they lived in New Orleans?
Oh yes.
Everybody lived in New Orleans?
I used to go, my mother used to take me to see her on Sundays, and we would ride the streetcar there. And
did she live in a nice neighborhood or a not so nice neighborhood?
Yeah, this was a nice neighborhood. It was quite a distance from where we lived, up in what we call the university section. But in those days, you could call the drugstore, the neighborhood drugstore, and the boy would bring whatever you ordered on a bicycle. And that was a big deal for me to go see my grandma and her 2 daughters that lived there. One daughter was married and didn't live at her house. She would always call for ice cream. And we just could never get there before the ice cream man got there.
So now your father, before he died, was an attorney?
He was an attorney. My father never went to law school.
Oh, he didn't?
No, he didn't. And some of the finest judges were his close friends, and they did it the same way. They did in Louisiana what they called, he read the law. He was in the office of a man named Leon Solis Kahn, C-A-H-N, a Jewish man. And he was there for 5 years, and he read the law, and then he took the examination, and he passed, and he practiced law.
Now, is that the man, the attorney that he worked for, is that the man who brought them a wedding gift or an engagement gift?
An engagement gift, yes. Your mother has that pin. That's a thing that Jewish people do if you're engaged. you go to your close friends and you bring them a substantial gift to honor their engagement.
So what does the pin look like? Have I seen
It's
it?
a straight bar pin with little bitty pearls on it and maybe one diamond on it.
Oh, I'll have to see
I
what
think
that
she
looks like.
still has it, I don't know.
Oh, I'm sure she does. So, what was your mother's name?
My mother's name was Anna Louise Schlosser, Schlosser.
And then Schubert.
And she married Theodora
Schubert.
Schubert, yeah. In her family there were 7 children, 6 girls and 1 boy. And they lived in New Albany, Indiana, of which I have a picture of the beautiful house that they lived in. Grandpa was by then retired. He thought, you know, you have to go way back in values of those times. And he was an immigrant from Germany when he was 13 years old. His first job was as lamplighter. The street lights, you had to crawl up and light the lamp. So when he was a young boy, he did that. Then when he reached manhood, the business he went into, he was a tobacconist. In other words, a tobacco shop. People smoked pipes and cigars and cigarettes and chewed tobacco and everything. And this business was called a tobacconist. The one business that he did not go into that I used to hear him talk about was the bag company. When he moved to New Orleans, somebody wanted him to go into the bag.
Why did he move to New Orleans?
He moved to New Orleans because he had a cousin, Valentine Mertz, Val Mertz, M-E-R-Z.
Mm-hmm.
And Valentine Mertz was also a German immigrant who was a little older than my grandfather and had come down to New Orleans and established himself in business and was acquiring real estate. And he established this brewery. It became the Dixie Brewery. It was called Mertz Products. And so then when Prohibition came in, my grandfather came down there at his urging, and he told him it was such a wonderful town, and all these ships came and went from New Orleans, and you'd have to supply the ships, and he had a wonderful going business.
So he moved all the 7 kids and his
Moved
wife
everybody down there, and he established the Jefferson Brewery Company.
Your grandfather?
My grandfather. And I have pictures of him with the horse-drawn carriages out in the yard of the brewery, you know, where they would carry the barrels on these wagons. And so anyhow, when Prohibition came in, this cousin, Uncle Valentine Mertz, he kept his business by selling what they call near beer and soda waters. In other words, he didn't violate the law, but he stayed in business.
Mm-hmm.
But Grandpa just threw in the sponge. Now, Grandpa was a person, he was a cute little short man.
What was his name?
Andreas, A-N-D-R-E-A-S, Schlosser. Andreas Frederick Schlosser.
I think that was Gary's dad's name. Frederick.
And what was his name?
Frederick Ploetz.
Oh, really? Well, anyhow, he used to
Germans.
always wear a little rose boutonniere in his lapel, and he'd dress up with his little straw caddy hat. I mean, he was a little dandy. So anyhow, where were we in his life? Okay, so he closed down.
You said he was sad that he didn't get into the bag business.
Well, but nothing ever came of that, but that would have been a good business to go into. But he was an entrepreneur. He drilled a well out in outside of Beaumont where Spindletop was.
Mm-hmm.
I have a picture of him with that, but he didn't hit.
Mm.
The people that did hit made millions and millions of dollars. But anyhow, then he, I was going to tell you how optimistic he was when he moved down there. He quit work when he had $50,000 in the bank. He thought he was a rich man. Of course, you're not rich anymore with $50,000.
But do you think he was rich back then?
Well, he was comfortable, yes, he lived, and you should see the house they lived in New Albany. I went to see it when I was,
Well, that's in Indiana. I thought that was in New Orleans.
no, before they moved to New Orleans, they lived in New Albany, Indiana.
So he quit in New Albany.
Yeah.
Oh, with 50,000.
And those houses, this house that I went to see when I was in Louisville, which is right across the river from New Albany, the house had parquet floors, stained glass windows, beautiful carved railing up the stairway. It was a beautiful home. At the time I saw it, a decorator owned it. He was very la-di-da, you know, but he was kind enough to let us go through it when I explained to him that my grandparents had lived there.
So, when did you do that?
Oh, I did that, it must have been 20 or 25 years ago when Easter Seal had a national meeting in Louisville, and we went over across the river to see
So
them.
how'd you know what the address was?
Oh, that's not that. My family all knew that. I mean, they all kept me informed of that, and besides, one of my aunts lived there, the one that had 7 children. Very prolific people. They were all Catholics, and that was Aunt Emma. She had 7 children.
I'm going to go get that picture. I want you to tell me who the women are in these pictures again. I got to get it off the wall.
Oh,
You keep
okay.
talking.
She's gone to get a picture back in the other room. She likes these old wedding pictures that we have of the family, and so she has one of my mother and 2 of her sisters in their wedding outfits.
Oh, no, this is you. Who's who in this picture?
I shall tell you. Okay, this is my mother. This is Anna Schlosser Schuber. And this is my mother's youngest sister, Aunt Eva, who died within 15 minutes of my father. She was only 26 years old. She was married to Dr. Louis Dubas in New Orleans, who taught internal medicine at Tulane Medical School. They never had any children. Well, they didn't hardly married long enough. And this is Aunt Emma.
Let's see if I can see that. No, probably not even.
Emma Goldman was her name.
Yep, you can see it.
Gohmann, and her husband was with a title company in Louisville, Kentucky, an examining attorney for a title company. And they reared 7 children.
So did the majority of them, no, I know the sister on the left stayed, Eva. Is that
Yeah, Eva.
was in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And then how did she get back north?
Well,
Or did
she
she
never
stay?
she never
She never
moved
came.
down. She
Oh.
married before they came down,
Okay.
and my mother came in. So
Do you know when those pictures were taken? 'Cause she
well,
looks like she was in the 1890s sometime.
I don't really know that date, but see, my mother was married about 4 years by the time my father died. So
It's about 1914.
yeah, she was married in 14 or 15, and my father died in 1918, November 1918, and I was born January 1919. And I can't tell you the dates on this. I don't really know.
Okay, that's neat. So this one, is this the one that had the 7 kids?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So she had 7 kids, and your mom had 1, and the other one had none, but then there were other children.
The sisters, I used to memorize that. They were Mamie, that's Aunt Mamie Cobb. She was the eldest. Mamie, Emma,
And it was this one in the 1890s maybe.
Stella, Aunt Stella, that was Gertrude and Paul and Andy's mother. Mamie, Emma, Stella. Louisa, Aunt Lou, was a maiden lady, and she was a nurse, and she never married. Anna is my mother's name. They didn't call it Anna, they called it Anna. And Eva. Now, those were the 6 girls. And the 7th child was Uncle Herman, the one boy. And as I told you, Grandpa was an entrepreneur, and he was always looking for something for Unky to do. And so he bought him a paper-making mill down in Gentilly in New Orleans. And It had great big wheels that the paper would go over, and it had to run on pure wool. That was just their system of making it. And it made real crinkly toilet tissue and hand toweling. That was before the days of soft Charmin and the kind of toilet tissue that we use now.
I guess it's better than catalog pages.
Yeah, it's better than newspaper. Anyhow, they had these rolls would have 500 sheets to the roll because it was so much thicker than, and so that the whole style of toilet paper, if you can call it a style of toilet tissue, changed right in 1929 when nobody had any money to do anything with anything. So because of the change, you were going to have to get all new machinery, and so that it would run this smoother paper and make 1,000 sheets to the roll. Well, they just threw in the sponge. In the first place, Unky was never a businessman. I mean, he had a lot of friends, people liked him, and he was kind to my mother. My mother had a social life without any boyfriends because she was fortunate to live in the same house with her brother, and he was always her available escort. And he belonged to the Mardi Gras balls, and he took her to that, and so she got along all right without having beaux, you know. And he lived at home most of his life. And of course, when we went off to New York, when Everett and I went up to New York to specialize, Unky was living up there at that time, and we got to see a lot of him up there. And then finally, he moved to Florida.
Well, didn't you find out something about him when you lived in New York?
Something very unhappy. He liked men, and he had a lot of men friends up there. And when he moved to Florida, he lived with a man and the man's 90-year-old mother. And it was Unky's house, and Unky had a Winnebago, and they'd take these trips and everything, but he had boyfriends.
So let's see, let's go back to your father and your mother. What's your mother's, oh, not your mother, what's your grandmother's name?
My grandmother was an invalid the whole time I was a child, and you're pressing me for names that I've never uttered.
Well, what'd you call her?
Well, she couldn't even talk.
Oh,
I
really?
didn't call her anything. She laid in bed all the time. She was an incapacitated invalid.
Well, how did she get that way?
I guess in today's time you would call it just senility. I mean, she just was old and very, very stout. They were married in 1999. They were married 50 years. And Aunt Mamie and Uncle Conrad Cobb had this splendiferous reception for them down at their farm, and they did get Grandma up to attend that, and they have a picture of her, but she was not a functioning person even at that time.
Well, now tell me about Mamie and Conrad.
Uncle Conrad...
Mamie was the oldest?
She was the eldest. Conrad Cobb had been married before, but I never heard too much about the previous marriage. But he was a handsome devil. You know, had a Van Dyke. You know what a Van Dyke is? Well, it's back in style now, where you have a little
goatee?
trimmed goatee down here and then a fancy beard up here. And he was tall, large of stature, and brunette. And he owned this restaurant in New Orleans. Now, he was an immigrant, too, and he came over with nothing in his purse. He was a dishwasher when it came to New Orleans. And when he died, he left an estate of some $6 or $7 million. I mean, he did all right by himself way back then.
So how did he do that?
Just by sheer work.
I mean, what kind of work did he do?
He built up that restaurant.
Cobb's restaurant?
Cobb's restaurant. He owned...
In the French Quarter.
No. So in St. Charles.
Well, so it's right outside the French Quarter. isn't it?
Yeah, it's right north of Canal Street, just in the first block north of Canal Street. But he owned the property right next to the restaurant, but he never did negotiate to buy the restaurant property. But when he died, he did own the place right next to it, which was a cheaper, it had no class to it. Cobb's Restaurant was a classy New Orleans dining place. This place right next to it that he owned the property of was just an eating joint. I don't even remember the name of it, but it was a long, straight alley kind of a thing, and nobody had ever heard of it.
So when I've been in Cobb's, I see that it's all electric now. The fans that somebody turns.
Those fans have been written up in a lot of magazines. They're all belt-driven. They're connected with each other. But he...
Were they actually people? Did people power them, or is it always electric power?
Oh, I never knew of it being people power.
Oh, okay.
Maybe way back in the days of slaves or somebody used to ride like a bicycle. I don't know about that. That's piling it higher and deeper.
Well, so he had Cobb's Restaurant, and they had a farm, you said?
Well, they owned the house at Broadway in St. Charles, which has been destroyed about 20 or 25 years ago, and it's now the educational building for the Baptist Church right across from the Dominican convent, which I went to the Dominican convent for 1 year until they got the new high school completed in New Orleans. But that was his townhouse, and then the reason we called it a farm, Gentilly at that time was really suburban to New Orleans. I mean, it was a long way out. And Uncle Conrad was a classy gentleman. He had a stable of very fine horses. He had a groom for his horses. He had, I've forgotten what you call these little trap dollies that you put behind a horse and they run, but just for one horse to pull it,
yeah.
you know.
I
don't know what they call it, but he had that. And so the farm was about 5 miles past the end of the streetcar line in New Orleans. In other words, the streetcar would go out to the main part of Gentilly, and then either somebody would come and meet you, or somehow, years before, he used to come out and meet people with his little trap horse thing and take you back to the farm. They had a lot of jolly times out there at the farm. I was telling somebody the other day that I have pictures of them in long dresses. The ladies wore long dresses. The tennis court was grass. And
you have a picture of them on, did they have a tennis court out at their house?
Yeah, they played tennis on the grass.
Wow.
But it was so antique that the ladies wore these long dresses to play. And I even had, when I was a child, I had some of their tennis rackets still there. They were all old and broken up and everything, but I thought they were all right when I was a kid.
So tennis runs in your family then?
Well, they weren't really that expert at tennis, but, and then Uncle Conrad, Aunt Mamie was a fancier of flowers, and he had 2 things out there that were very unique to New Orleans. New Orleans has no rocks. In other words, you can go out here in San Antonio and pick up all the rocks that you want, but you don't find any rocks. There's no rock at all in New Orleans.
Just mud.
Yeah. So he had this hankering for a rock garden, and he didn't have any rocks. So he had loads and loads and loads of rocks shipped down from Indiana.
Huh.
And it was very beautiful. In other words, he had all kinds of rocks, and he would investigate what kind of plants grew best in the crevices of these rocks and things. And the other thing he had was a sunken garden out there that was planted on both sides with hydrangea. Now hydrangea is normally, I'm probably going to get this backwards, it's normally pink, but if you want it to be blue, you put steel shavings on it. And so he wanted it blue. I mean, he didn't want just the common, ordinary kind of hydrangea. He wanted the blue ones. And during his heyday, I mean, they kept that all blue.
So what's happened to that estate?
Well, it was sold to it was 7 acres, and land in New Orleans was very, very expensive because they were practically out of land. They sold it to a discount house, kind of like Walmart is today or something like that. And they had no idea that it would disturb the peace and quietude of the countryside. But this place had a big parking lot with it. In other words, they sold them a few acres off it, see. And the parking lot would have music blaring in the parking lot so that you could hardly hear yourself think.
So they sold off some land first before they
Yeah.
sold off their house?
And they had, behind it, they had a railroad that came through there. But you know, a railroad takes an awfully long time to make a turn, and through the negotiations of trying to sell it to somebody. By the way, it was right between this big discount house and then Schwegman was a food place. It was over on the other side. So one of the sales that was proposed was, what is this furniture store that's way out?
I know Schwegman still exists.
Yes, Schwegman still exists, but they had an option to some national furniture place, and the idea was they were going to have to get the landing for the railroad behind there. Well, the pillars from the, I guess it's IH-10, I don't know which highway it is, were in the way, and a train has to make a long, I mean miles to make a turnaround. They never could work that out. Let's see.
So who'd they sell the house to?
I don't really know now.
Did they have kids?
Oh no, they never had children.
Mamie and Conrad never had kids?
Never had children. Never had children. He brought his niece, Amelia. Amelia Cobb was his brother's daughter over from Germany. And she never spoke a word of English when she got here, but she soon learned, and she also learned how to count money. And she inherited quite a bit from that
Is Amelia
estate.
still alive?
No, she's dead now. She had nieces, and a niece and a nephew that benefited from her estate. She brought them over from Europe. They were let's see, Amelia's brother had these 2 children who were, well, they're people my age. And he came over here to, he got a job in Houston at a very fancy petroleum club or something like that. And then they finally moved to New Orleans, and the girl married a physician, not German, and she has been in and out of mental institutions all of her life. I mean, I don't think she's as crazy as she is, just has these nervous breakdowns. And she had a brother, and I think he lives in Houston, and he came over to visit us one time and took Toady to a party. He's married, and I don't think he has much to do with his sister, but they got all of the really, really good things out of Aunt Mamie's possessions. For instance, one thing I never did find out what happened to it. Uncle Conrad had a full-size statue in bronze of the Maid of Orleans. And he had it on a little hill out in the yard, and some vandals came along and tried to steal that thing, and they got it just as far as the fence, and they just couldn't negotiate it any farther. So I don't know who has that, but they had beautiful furnishings. But he would do things such, you know, part of possessions that you have is the memory of where you got it and how you got it and why you wanted it. He would do such things that he found out that fancy homes had a gold room. In other words, a room, sort of a music room with this gold leaf furniture. So you told the decorator he wanted a gold room in his house at Broadway and St. Charles. And so he got that. But then also these Dresden dolls that have the lace, it's ceramic, you know, a Dresden doll with a lace skirt and everything is all very finely made. Well, part of the nice part of having a collection is remembering where you bought it and how you found it and everything. He just went to New York and told him he wanted a case of that thing, and they sent him a case, you know, I mean a showcase with it.
Case of dolls.
And it had every kind of statue and little thing on that you wanted to have on it. So, how much more time do we have?
We got lots of time.
I'm running out of ideas.
Oh, well, no, I've got lots more things to ask you. So, okay, Mamie was the first, then Stella?
Maybe Emma.
Emma.
Emma stayed in New Albany.
Emma stayed in New Orleans and had New Albany and had 7 children.
Right.
And
Stella had 4 children. She lived in New Orleans 4 blocks from us.
And then who?
Louisa.
And she was the nurse and never married.
That's right.
And then
My
your
mother.
mom.
And then Eva.
Okay.
Aunt Lou had a beau,
Mm-hmm.
and he broke her heart. The man had given her a diamond engagement ring, and he came to the front door and rang the bell, and whoever answered the door, he told him he came to get the ring back. I never heard more to the story, but anyhow, he dumped her. And
Wow.
She never had any more beaux, but she was very well liked by her patients. She trained at Tureau Infirmary, which is still there in New Orleans, which is where Tom Duncan was born. And she had a lot of clients that would just ask for her. I mean, they wouldn't think they had a nurse if they didn't have her on duty.
What do you remember about your mom? What did she look like?
Oh, my mother was a pretty woman, but she claimed that she never wanted to put a stepfather over me, that she promised herself that, which was a terrible thing for her to do because she lived a very lonely life, except that I told you that my uncle took the place of a partner as far as they belonged to bridge clubs together and things that married couples usually do. She had the Carters were her close friends, Ethel and Ed Carter, and Alice Carter was my age, their daughter. And we used to always go on weekends over to Biloxi, Mississippi, the Seashore Methodist Assembly, which is just short of Biloxi. Their grandmother owned a place there. And
That's the name of the city?
Seashore Methodist Assembly, that's what it's called. It's between Gulfport and Biloxi.
Okay.
And belongs to the Methodist Church.
Huh.
And they had an eating hall there, which made it very easy to take guests for the weekend because you didn't have to bring any food or anything. And the food was good. But that house, the mosquitoes were so bad. We didn't have screens, and we slept under mosquito bars. You ever slept under a mosquito bar? Well, we slept under mosquito bars to keep the mosquitoes from biting the heck out of us. I'm sure that they don't own that property anymore. And Alice married a doctor that was my age, and big Catholic, and they live in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. He's retired now. Alice and I used to go to dancing school together every Friday night. I would spend the night over there because the dancing school was in her neighborhood, and we could walk to it and walk back.
So what kind of dancing did you learn?
Social dancing, all kinds of social dancing.
So there were little boys there too, then?
Oh yeah, oh sure, there's little boys there.
Well, I mean, as opposed to like taking ballet or something
Oh, no.
like that. So, what, do you remember any pearls of wisdom that your mom taught you? Or that you think she instilled upon you?
Well, I think I had a good mother, but she was not a very strict person.
Wasn't strict?
No, she really wasn't. I mean, she was kind of hang loose, and I think she bent over backwards not to restrict me too much. I don't know, because I've only I'm only myself. I didn't have any sisters or brothers to
Didn't see how she
compare
acted
it
with anybody
to.
else. Well, now, where'd you go to elementary school?
I went to elementary school at Lusher, Lusher school, which was about 4 or 5 blocks from us when we lived on Broadway in Zimple. And so you come up Pine Street, I think it was, about 4 blocks, and that's where the elementary school
Well, I've been
was.
on Pine Street before.
Yeah.
And so you moved back in with your grandparents when your dad died, or
In those days, girls didn't go out. I mean, if they were a femme sole or a woman alone, they didn't go and get themselves an apartment. That was a no-no. They went home to Mama and Papa.
and so y'all lived at the corner of Broadway and Zimple?
Yeah, and Mama and Papa usually had a big enough house to accommodate everybody. That house on New Orleans, I started to go back there to go through it about 5 or 6 years ago when I went over there for Jennifer Nisbet's graduation from Newcomb. And I said, I want to go see that house when we finish over here. Well, I'm glad I didn't go in. When we got closer to it, you could see they had, as I call it, bastardized it. They had a fire engine parked down in a make-do garage down front and so forth. And
It's the Pi Kappa Alpha house.
I
now.
didn't even want to see
It's a
it.
fraternity house.
But anyhow, it was a very avant-garde house in that day, because I remember at that time it was already 50 years old when I lived there, because Uncle told me our house is 50 years old. It had 2 bathrooms, and it had 5 bedrooms. And 2 bathrooms in that old of a house was pretty avant-garde. And the chandelier in the dining room had the gas, what do they call them? They don't call them candles. But anyhow, the fixture at the top of they had the electric lights, but then they had the gas duct. So in case the electricity went out, which they had a lot of storms there, that you could have gas lights up, you used a mantle, a little thing that glowed, you know. Each one had a place for the gas mantle to be lit. And Grandpa's bathroom had, and it's come back into style if you save anything long enough, it had a bathtub that sat up on feet, you know. And around the bottom of it, someone had painted rosebuds. It had garlands of rosebuds painted around the bottom of the
That's
thing.
neat. Well, so you went to Lusher Elementary School. Now, did y'all speak German at your house, or speak
No,
English?
not in my time. I mean, my grandfather could still command a little German, but nobody spoke it around there.
So is Lusher a public school or a private school?
Oh no, it was
It's
a public school.
So
And
then,
part of the time I went to Holy Name over with what they call it, the Little Jesuits. They have 2 Jesuit churches in New Orleans, the Uptown Jesuits and Downtown Jesuits. And the Holy Name, what do they call it, a parish? That's the name of it. The Holy Name Parish had a girls' school at the corner, which is right across from the Jewish temple, which was being built at that same time. I remember they had to drill, what do they call the pilings, yeah, they had the pile drivers there for about a whole year. We could hardly hear ourselves think. And then the first year that I was to be in high school, they were building a new public high school in New Orleans, Eleanor McMain High School. And so I went to Dominican Convent, which was right across the side street from Broadway and St. Charles, where Aunt Mamie lived, but she didn't. They never were in residence there. By that time, they were always out at what they called the farm. And they had a little Irish housekeeper there, Mrs. Shephers, and she lived there. And she had little black skirts that she would wear all the way down to her ankles, and little shoes that she would patty around in. And any time that I wanted to go over there for lunch, because it was right across the street from the Dominican Convent, see, I was welcome. She was glad to have the company. And I used to be so proud to go over there, because I'd think, I hope somebody sees me going into this fancy house. And nobody saw me, I'm sure, nor cared.
Well, And so then after that you went to the Eleanor McMain High School.
Right.
And did you go to college?
Well, I have a patchwork of college. Got married when I was 19. I worked before then. I worked for the Internal Revenue Service, and I was, what did they call me? I had some word for it. In other words, I was an agent in their office. And at the time, I didn't even know how to put down, I was a minor, this was before I was 19. My mother had always guarded the fact of what her age was. And I'd always ask her, you know, how old are you, Mother? And she'd say, oh, I'm sweet 16. Well, I knew when I filled out that thing, that wasn't right. Something was wrong there. But anyhow, because I was going to have to be bonded in this job. But anyhow, so back to getting married. So I got married, and
well, now you gotta tell how you met Grandpa.
oh, he lived next door to me. He's the boy next door.
He lived next door. So how'd you meet him?
Well, we had a swing on our porch, and there were some houses in that neighborhood that were. This was Depression time. I mean, nobody had any money, and some medical students or any kind of college students would look around for a boarding house to pay so much a month so that they could eat there, you know. So there were several houses around in the neighborhood that did this, that had young men to come and eat there. So this girl that I went to school with told me that she saw this good-looking blonde guy, and he ate over at a house near her neighborhood, and she said, he lives right next to you. And I said, well, come on over to my house, and we'll sit on the swing outdoors, and we'll see.
I mean, did he really live there, or was he renting a room next to you?
He lived at this house next to me.
But it wasn't his family's house.
Oh, no.
No, he was just there.
These people rented a room out to students.
I got you.
He lived there. So she and I go over there, and we're waiting to see this guy, you know, and I don't know what he looks like. She's the only one that's seen him. My God, she got so excited when he came out. And he came over, and the houses were pretty close. In other words, if I came over to my banister, and he was at the banister over there, he was not more than 10 feet away, see. And I said, well, come over and meet this person. And so she got so excited she ran home. So that's how I met him. And he started taking me to medical school dances, which, see, I met him when I was 15, married him when I was 19.
And he's 10 years older than you,
He was 11 years old.
11.
11.
So when you were 15, he was 26? This 26-year-old man was taking a 15-year-old girl out?
Right, and it was written up in the medical thing, the little paper that they put out, that he was robbing the cradle and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So what'd you think about him the first time you met him?
Oh, I thought he was pretty nice. Well, anyhow, so then...
So how did he propose to you?
Well, that just kind of falls into place. I mean, we just decided we were going to get married. I don't know how all that came about, but...
So when you met him, was he a first-year med student, or, I mean, why'd y'all wait 4 years? I mean, obviously you're too young before that, but...
Well, his father was still living. He had to go through his father's demise, and he was the one that his mother depended upon. He was running back and forth and seeing about that, and seeing about their business interests. They had...
So where is he from?
Trees, T-R-E-E-S, Louisiana, right outside of Shreveport.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And his father was the head of the, well, it's called Exxon, Standard Oil, New Jersey then, of the field there. And this was so long ago that they used buffalo to dredge in the machinery for these things because it was just mud and water and all that kind of stuff. His father was not an educated man, but he was smart as the dickens. He patented something for the oil field thing, and he had to relinquish the rights to the patent to Exxon, but it's still used. I've forgotten what it was. It's some kind of a gadget or something.
So did you ever really know his dad?
I never met the father, no. He died then. The first year I knew ever, he died. And then his mother passed away when she was 72. She still lived there in Trees, Louisiana.
So did you meet her?
Oh, yeah.
You knew her.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember their names?
His sisters and brothers?
No, his mother and father.
Yeah, Mary, Susan, Troutman, Duncan.
And what was his father's name? Do you remember that?
He was A.T. Duncan. Now, let's see. He was Andrew Thomas.
Oh, so that's where you got, that's where
But
Drew got his
people
name.
called him Tom Duncan, see? But his middle name was Thomas.
I see.
A.T. Duncan was the father's name. And the mother was Mary, Susan, Troutman, that was her maiden name, Duncan.
And so Grandpa had some brothers and sisters?
Oh yes, he had Clifford and Homer and Everett and Desi and Carrie. There were 5 children.
Desi
Dessie.
and Carrie. Is Desi a boy or a girl?
Desi was a girl.
Okay.
And I don't blame you for not knowing it's an
Never heard
indecisive
that
name.
And so, so y'all just decided to get married and
Well, he had to do his internship.
in New Orleans? Did he do it?
No, he did his internship at Temple, Texas.
Oh,
You know, in those days, most of the internships paid nothing. It was called a stipend, S-T-I-P-E-N-D. But Temple, Texas paid $50 a month, and I know to you that doesn't sound like much, but if you get a place to live and your 3 meals a day and you get $50 a month, that's better than nothing.
that is.
And so that's where he took his internship.
So he did that and came back and married you?
Oh yeah.
No, where did y'all
He
get
got-
married?
Well, now thereby lies a tale. Right before we were married, the main place to have a wedding, if you were not Catholic and not received in the church to have it in front of the altar, was the Orleans Club on St. Charles Avenue. But about a month before that, they had a wedding there, and they had a fight in the dining room or the kitchen facility of the thing, where the sink was in the kitchen. And they were drunk, I'm sure somebody was drunk. And one guy punched the other. I didn't mean to kill him, you know, but the guy fell over and conked his head on the sink and killed him. So at that point, the Catholic Church said, no more non-Catholics can be married in a public place. It has to be in the rectory of the church or at home. So that's where we were married.
So Grandpa wasn't Catholic.
No.
What was he?
Well, he had been brought up a Methodist, but he wasn't really very strict on anything. But he didn't go to church.
So y'all got married at home then?
Uh-huh.
And where'd you get your dress from? Where's the
Well,
picture
my
go?
dress was just a
Boy,
bought
when did
dress.
y'all get married?
A
July,
Huh?
July 1938.
July the 9th, 1938.
It's pretty-
That dress was...
The glass is all broken. but-
Yeah, you said you were going to get that glass fixed. I'm going to
Mm.
have to take it and get it fixed. It was just a white chiffon dress that...
Is it store-bought or did you make it? Or?
Oh no, it was bought, but it was not meant to be a wedding dress. You know, it was just a white
Oh, it
evening
wasn't?
dress. No, it was just a white evening dress.
Well, it looks pretty.
Thank you.
Looks like a wedding dress.
And my bridesmaids all had just dresses that they wore. You don't know what a depression is. You don't have enough money to go down and buy a dress just to be in a wedding.
Well, who are your bridesmaids?
Okay, my cousins, Gertrude and she's, let's see, let me dredge up their names now. See, I haven't thought of these people in 40 or 50 years.
One of them.
Mary Bertha and Gertrude, those were 2 daughters of Aunt Stella. And Alice Kelleher, who was a friend of mine who still lives in New Orleans. Those were my 3 bridesmaids. And everybody at that time had a pastel-colored chiffon evening dress of some kind. And I said, well, just wear what you have. And it worked out fine. One would have a yellow dress, and one would have a peach-colored dress, and the other one had a green dress.
So who was Grandpa's groomsmen?
Well, I don't know. I think Uncle Herman stood up with him.
And who married y'all?
A priest.
A priest did?
Yeah, oh yeah, a priest, yeah. We
Just
got a
not
priest.
at the church. At home.
But not at the church.
And so, what'd y'all do after you got married? Where'd y'all live?
Oh, let's see, where did we live? Oh, Weeks Island. He got this job with the salt mine, the Miles Salt Company, at Weeks, Louisiana.
What was he doing for them?
Well, he was a doctor for 3,500 people.
Oh.
25,
So a
25
private
months.
company hired him to
I'm
be
gonna
their
tell you.
doctor?
I'll tell you about it. There were two companies out there. There was the Miles Salt Company. You've heard of Miles Salt.
No, not really, but
It's probably outdated by now. And there was a chemical company. They had two companies there. They were interrelated. And I wrote a paper in my sociology class when I finally got to go to college up in Nashville on this. And it's a whole story of a company town. In other words, you had the executive houses, that was the doctor and the officers of the company. They lived up on a hill. Then you had the regular workers that worked in the mine. The mine went down 700 feet below and it was a salt
dome.
a salt dome, and they have since, in these times, they have used it, or said they would use it to store oil. It has one of the deepest oil wells drilled in the whole United States out there. There are 3 islands. There's Jefferson, Avery, and Miles.
Weeks.
Weeks. Jefferson, Avery, and Weeks Island. And they're all in a row there. And they're all, they all have, this one had salt. I don't know if the others had mines or not. But that Tabasco salt sauce is made at Avery Island. It's right outside of New Iberia. So we were there for 2 years, and of course Everett wanted to specialize, and he was negotiating on that. And we went from the sublime to the ridiculous. We went from the country place, 35 miles out of New Iberia on a gravel road, where you never went to town without a flat tire. I mean, that was just par for the course. I had a friend of mine who was an attorney in Houston come and visit us with his wife, and we had a flat tire, and Everett was not with us, and he got out and he said, "Well, let's see, who do you call?" I said, "You don't call anybody, you just change the tire."
So now tell me about being the census taker out at Weeks Island.
Well, they had trappers out there that would trap muskrat, and I mean, they were back in the boondocks, and the only people that could really find them were people that they wanted to find them. Nobody knew where they were, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And you could be within a stone's throw of somebody's house, and you'd stop and say, "You know where John Jones lives?" And they'd say, "I never heard of him." And they'd know who he was, but they thought maybe it was the police coming after him or something. But anyhow, what year was that? Which census was it?
Probably 1940.
1940, yeah. So they asked me if I would assist them in taking the census, because I was one of the few people that could lead them to where these trappers were hidden out around there. So I've forgotten what they gave me. They gave me $4 or $5 a day, or $8 or $10. I don't know what it was. It didn't make much, but anyhow. So I'd ride around with those guys and show me. You'd have to know the roads. There were no street signs.
Yeah.
And, you know, you come to a fork in the road, well, you either take a left or you take a right. And so I did. I helped them with the census.
So now you have to tell me again, you told me that I shouldn't ask for crystal when I got married. Because did you get crystal when you got married?
I got it. I have three pieces left.
And why is that?
I have 3 pieces left. And in fact, this girl that I played bridge with a couple of years ago, I was telling him I was so proud that I had 4 of them. Didn't she pick up one of them and break the damn thing? And so she went out and she bought me another glass. Of course, it doesn't match or anything, but she wanted to replace it in some way.
Well, why did you end up with only 3 pieces?
because I had a little mulatto girl, I was a no-good nitnook as far as the kitchen was concerned. I mean, we didn't have dishwashers, and I would let stuff just pile up till doomsday if it were left up to me. And she was not really heavy upstairs, but and the funny thing was, you see, they had a Negro section there too, where they all lived in one area. But this mulatto group lived about 3 miles away, and the black people wouldn't have anything to do with them. In other words, the white people didn't want to have anything to do with them because they were not pure white. And the Negroes wouldn't have anything to do with them either. So she worked for me, and oh my gosh, and when you asked me how much I paid her, but I paid the going rate, I think it was $5 a week. And you have...
Did she come every day?
Yeah, you have, in the country, you have your main meal is at noon.
Mm-hmm.
And then she'd go home. In other words, she'd come in the morning and make the bed and wash the dishes and sweep up a little bit and fix a little lunch. And not only that, she did laundry. Now, out there, they don't think that anything's clean unless they boil it. And of course, we didn't have fancy laundry facilities. They were out in a shed. But she had a big black kettle that she would boil all of my sheets. She would build a fire and boil the sheets to get them clean.
Did you use soap?
Huh? Oh yeah,
Did
she
you
used soap too.
Soap and boiling water?
Yeah.
Huh. So, okay, so y'all lived there for a little while.
2 years.
2 years.
And we went to New York.
And was Uncle Tom born by then?
Oh no.
No, not yet.
Oh no.
So by the time y'all go to New York, the war is rumbling.
Tom was born in 43 and
43.
Tony was born in 46. So we go up to New York, and now we thought the logical place to look for a place to live would be near where we were going to, he was going to take his instruction. And it was New York Skin and Cancer, which was way down on 2nd Avenue, way south. And that's gotten to be a very in place now. I don't know what they call it, Soho or something like that. But it was just the dregs. So we see a place that has a for rent sign out, and we go in, and it looked all right to us. I mean, it was very cheap, very inexpensive, and they had just done over all these hardwood floors and had varnish on them and everything. And I said to the person, I said, well, what's the matter with this place? And they said, well, there's nothing the matter with it except it's a cold water flat. I said, what's that mean? They said, that's what it is. It doesn't have any hot water, and you go down the hall to the bathroom. So we got back in our car, and we decided we had to be a little more decent than that, and we lived at Tudor City, which is still in existence. It's a nice little apartment complex at 2nd Avenue and 42nd Street. And didn't we take you to see it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's still there.
So what was the first car you ever remember riding in? Who did that belong to?
Riding in?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Unky bought that's Uncle Herman. In the depths of the Depression, he bought a big, old Lincoln. And I've told somebody this up in New Braunfels the other day when they had these antique cars on exhibit. It had little vases in the back seat, you know, for rosebuds.
Oh, really?
On each side, it had little vases. And on the back, which I showed you in New Braunfels, they had a place for a trunk. And then you would open this main big trunk, and it was made up of about 5 very slender, about that thick, long suitcases, we'll call them, that you could keep things in. So anyhow, Unky was so proud of that thing, and he still had the, when he had that, he still had the mill, the paper mill. And he had a half Indian man that worked for him. And that man could do anything. I mean, he was just a born mechanic for that, for all that machinery around there. But he also would put on the dog and act like if they'd have a party at my grandfather's house, he would come up there and serve, and then, of course, from the restaurant, we had uniforms for him. He'd have on a white coat and everything. I mean, we looked like we were living high on the hog, you know, and starving to death. But anyhow, Unky sold that Lincoln for $25 just for the chrome that was in it. $25, that's what he sold it for.
Who did he sell it to for $25? How much do you think he paid for it?
I don't know what he paid for it, but he didn't pay much for it. But it ran, I mean, we had it for about 8 or 10 years.
So what was the first car you and Grandpa ever had together?
Well, he had Chevrolets. His mother bought him cars. I can't remember exactly, but we
So y'all had a car up in New York?
We had a car in New York, but we put it in dead storage. In New York at that time, you'd have to pay $40 a month for live storage. In other words,
You could use your car.
in and out and everything. And so we had it over on the waterfront, and I had it up on blocks in a warehouse. And I've forgotten what the name of that ship was that burned at that period. It was quite a disaster. I mean, a wonderful, wonderful luxury liner, and it caught on fire. And Everett, of course, he had all these badges for civil defense and everything, because they'd asked him, you know, because he was a doctor, would he sign up, because we were about to go into war. And so he went over there to see about the car, and they left him through. Well, he didn't have any prayer of getting the thing out then, but he did. When he took it out of storage, it had been sitting up there for 2 years, and it had no brake fluid in it. And he had to drive across town Manhattan with no brakes. I mean, just going along.
Oh gosh. So what did he do for the war? He signed up for civil defense, or?
Well, that was everybody did that. Yeah.
What is that?
Well, they'd have air raid sirens would go off practically every night in New York, and they'd have blackouts. You couldn't have any lights on.
Really?
Oh yeah.
And so what would he do?
We'd go to bed, and the first time, we were on the 11th floor, so we were, in other words, if a building has 22 floors, the middle number is the safest thing. And people used to congregate on our floor because when the siren would go off, see?
Huh.
Well, he put up with that about once or twice. He said, I'm not going to pay attention to that. Just act like we're not here. We just closed the door. We didn't fool with that.
But, I mean, with his being in civil defense, what does that mean he had to do?
Oh, he didn't have to do anything.
Oh.
No, he didn't have to do anything.
So, was he scared that he'd have to go to war or anything?
He was called, yeah. He had to register for the draft, and then he got a commission in U.S. Public Health Service because he thought that would be better than going over and getting shot at.
So that's what he did, U.S. Public Health Service.
Right. And during the Second World War, that was, it was under the Coast Guard, and it was considered military service. In other words, he is a veteran because of that service. Of course, it's not anymore, I mean, but it's under the Coast Guard, and he wore the uniform that you couldn't tell that his uniform looked like an Army uniform. But he could also, if he were at a U.S. Public Health Service hospital, he would wear a Navy uniform.
So he had a bunch of uniforms.
No, he only had the tan one.
Oh.
So then they put...
Was he still going to school and doing this, or did he have to stop his training?
Oh, he had to stop his training.
To go work at these hospitals?
They put 12 dermatologists into service for, well, I've told you this, and it's going to bore you to hear it again, but the specialty was called dermatology and syphilology. And we have all the books that they published way back when. It's D and S. But then after the Second World War, they even dropped that word syphilology because when penicillin came out, any general practitioner could give you a shot and you'd be through with syphilis, and they don't even consider that part of the specialty anymore.
So he would go work at these military hospitals in New York, or?
No.
What did he do?
Well, he was in his training. You see, they didn't jerk him out of training. he was down at New York Skin and Cancer, and he worked as a protege for Dr. George Miller McKee, right across from the Metropolitan Museum on Fifth Avenue. And then when he finished that, then we were one of these 12 people that were sent to the University of Michigan first for about 3 months, and then sent out to different venereal disease control hospitals all over the United States. And of course, one of the venereal diseases was gonorrhea, and the nickname for it is clap. And so they used to joke about, well, where are you going? Well, we're going to take the clap out of deep in the heart of Texas. But
well, when you were in New York, who'd you work for? Or did you work?
I
know
worked
you
for the National Association of Manufacturers in the Time and Life Building in Rockefeller Center. I was in the speech writing department, and I published a little bulletin for our board of directors, and the board of directors of the National Association of Manufacturers were the big honkies of industry in the United States. And so every day I would show the reflection of our publicity, in other words, how we had been received. We subscribed to a clip service, and there were so many strikes in the United States then that we subscribed to it for the word strike, S-T-R-I-K-E. We had to quit it. I mean, we couldn't afford the clips at 5 cents a piece. We had tons of them sent to us.
So why are there so many strikes going on?
Well, because it was wartime and people were trying to make more money and all that sort of thing.
So Grandpa thought it was okay for you to work?
Oh, sure. We had to. My gosh, what do you mean thought it was all right?
Well, I didn't know. You had to?
Yeah, we had to. Where else would we get some money?
So he wasn't earning any money during his training?
No, in fact, he was paying tuition.
Oh.
No, he wasn't earning any money. He did, I think he made a little money when he worked for, when he was helping in the afternoons with Dr. McKee, but not enough to make a lot of difference in anything.
So y'all went to Ann Arbor next?
Well, we went up there before they took us up there just to tell them what the program was for this thing about penicillin and the control of venereal diseases, and then they sent them out to different places in the United States.
So had penicillin, had that just been discovered, or had it been around for a
Oh,
while?
it had been discovered, but they hadn't used it in the treatment of syphilis, and believe me, that nobody knew what they were doing, and they were doing it by guess and by golly. They didn't know what dosage to give anybody. They tried all kinds of things before that. They had what they called a slow arsenical drip or something like that. And the man who was head of University of Michigan came down to see us, and he said to Everett, he said, "Doctor," he said, "I see that you're not using any of this slow drip. Why?" This was before they got the penicillin. Well, he said, the reason I'm not using it, I've long since forgotten the statistics, but that it has a mortality rate of killing like 10 people per 1,000, see? It kills them. And he said, I'm running X number of patients here in and out, and he said, I just didn't want to kill that many people. And so he said, well, you know, he said, it is in the regulations, we want you to use it. So he told this man who, this doctor that was head of, up in Michigan, he said, "Doctor," he said, "if you will send a written letter to me commanding me to do it, I will do it." He never got the letter.
Well, that's good.
See?
And so then after there, where'd you move? Nashville?
Yeah.
I'll go to Nashville.
Well, let me tell you while I was in New York what
Okay.
was going on about school. I went to Columbia for a while, night school. I was in the speech department. Of course, I was working in the speech department, and I took speech at Columbia. Now, most of the people that were taking speech with me at night over there were successful business people from Germany and other places in Europe that had fled the Jewish Holocaust and everything over there, and they wanted to be in business here, and they were taking speech at Columbia just to improve their language skills. So, about going to Columbia, I would have to walk 2 blocks to the subway, take the subway north, and transfer in Harlem. And you see, you could do that then. There's no way you could do that this day and time. I don't think you'd get there alive the second night.
Well, so you didn't get a degree from Columbia, though?
Oh, no, I just took a couple of courses.
Did you have a maid while you lived in New York?
Oh, are you a dreamer? I didn't have any money.
Well.
The only, did you ever sit in a second balcony of a movie?
Did I?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Well, we did. If we wanted to see a movie, that's what we sat in.
Were those the cheap seats?
Sure.
Okay, so tell me some more.
Well, where are we?
I don't know, we're either in New York or Nashville now.
Oh, so we go
pick
to
your pick.
Nashville. Now, when we went to Nashville, Everett was very protective of his mother, and we found a little house. You see, we were going to have to live in the hospital. And we
In the hospital?
In the hospital. We had an apartment upstairs.
Okay.
And they had a dining hall. That, in other words, I really didn't have to do anything there. They sent somebody up to clean up my place and to make the beds, and I ate down in the dining hall, and it was, everything was rationed. Now, Everett used to go out to the bases and buy his shoes. I mean, he was in the military, and he could get his shoes out there. And we used to have these coupons for gasoline. Well, we didn't have many places to go, but anyhow. But you also had coupons for sugar and for meat and for butter. Now, he was also the doctor for the Southern Pacific Railroad, so we had a pass. And my family lived in New Orleans, and this was in Nashville. And that was before I ever flew anywhere. He wouldn't fly anyhow. So we save up all my tickets, you see, because we're not buying any food anywhere. In other words, we don't have to use our meat tickets and sugar and all that kind of stuff. So when we go down to see my mother, boy, I'd have the woman that ran the dining room at the hospital order me out 2 hams and I don't know how much butter and so many pounds of sugar, and I'd go down there just loaded with all this stuff, and you don't believe it, but people were so anxious for this stuff. They were just, it was like manna from heaven, you know.
Yeah, really. So did you think that's kind of strange, eating in the dining room with your husband every night, or?
No.
No, you didn't think that was
We
kind
didn't even have a dining room in our
I
apartment.
mean a dining hall, you know,
No.
cafeteria or whatever. So
Well,
what?
he was the king of the roost there. He was in charge of the whole hospital. He got whatever he wanted. I mean,
Oh, I didn't know that.
and they used to, and then when Tom was born, I went to New Orleans to have Tom, and the woman that ran the dining hall, she would buy, just ask me what I wanted in the way of baby food. She would buy it by the case. A case of this, a case of that, a case of that. I mean, we just had it by the case.
So y'all still lived in Nashville, but you came all the way home to have Tom?
Uh-huh.
Why'd you do that? If you're living in a hospital.
Because Everett wanted me to be delivered by the man that taught him OB-GYN in New Orleans at Tulane.
So you went home on a train
Yeah,
and came back with a baby?
I guess so. I don't know. I guess
So did you went to school in Nashville a little bit too, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I really went to school there. I was pregnant with Tom, and went to Iscariot and Vanderbilt and Peabody, all right together. And you could matriculate at one place and take interchangeable courses. Well, I took some courses at Vanderbilt, but I was really at Peabody. And it is now the Teachers College of Vanderbilt. And I remember one time I was really pregnant, and I was going down some marble stairs, and I fell, and I thought, oh God, that's the end of this pregnancy. So I went to the nurse's office and everything. They gave me some kind of a shot. I didn't miscarry.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
So did you get a degree from there?
Oh no,
No?
I'm about, I went to Trinity also. I'm about 22 hours off a degree.
Huh.
I mean, I've just had hodgepodge here and there, and you know, I'll never get a degree. That's all right.
So how long did y'all stay in Nashville?
I lose track of time. I don't really know. About 2.5 years, I would imagine.
And then did y'all come
And
back?
then when he was out of service, what did we do then? Oh, that's when he went to Chicago, because there was this doctor there who was a dermatologist who had ruined his face by giving himself shots of x-ray on his adult pimples, you know, acne. In other words, he thought if a little bit was good, a whole lot more would be a whole lot better. See, years ago, they didn't even calibrate these things. They would take an ox bone and hold it in front of a film and see how much it blotted out. That's how rudimentary the testing was.
Wow.
So he was a very close friend of two of the Mayo brothers, and he had he had so much scarring and everything that he got to the point where he could not close his mouth at night to sleep, and if you can't close your mouth, your throat gets all dry. So he went there for a year, and
Did you go too?
Huh?
Did you go too?
Oh no,
You didn't go?
he left Everett in charge of his office in Chicago.
Oh, he went to the Mayo
Clinic. And they
but you were up in Chicago.
Yeah, they grafted, in other words, they take his arm and put it down here, and then they take a piece of skin off that and put it there and so forth. They rebuilt his mouth in a year's time. And so we were up there for, I guess 2 years, and we lived at 9613 South Hoxie. South Hoxie was almost down to the steel mills. You could almost see them pouring the slag over the steel mills. And in Chicago, you are dead if you're not in a northern suburb. At least you used to be. But
it's
now,
still the same one.
Dr. Finnerud, who Everett worked for, lived at South Shore, which is south, but Snitsy south. And he didn't even keep a car in Chicago. He had the same cab pick him up at the same time every day and bring him down to the Loop.
What would y'all do? Y'all had a car.
We had a car.
And so Uncle Tom was there with y'all.
Yeah, and then I got pregnant for Toady. And I went back to New Orleans to have Toady, and this Dr. Finnerud could not believe that I was going back to New Orleans to have a baby. He said, doesn't she know that we have the finest lying-in hospital in the world here in Chicago? And Everett said, yeah, but she wants to go back to New Orleans to have her baby.
So you came back and you had Mama.
Came back.
So was she an easy delivery? Or do you remember?
You know, in those times, they knocked you out so much, you didn't know much of anything. Goody for that. I'm glad I didn't live through these bad days of natural childbirth and everybody said, puff and huff. I didn't know any of that. They just give you a pill and give you a shot and come out.
So let's see, what are your fondest memories of Grandpa? Was he romantic or not romantic, or was he sweet, or was
He was a good old guy. No, he was not really a romanticist, but he was stable, and of course he was 11 years older than I am. You know, if you just think right now, you're 28. Wouldn't you think? What's your age difference?
Gary's 6 years older than I am. So
Yeah, but
he's
that's-
34.
That's
so
a lot closer than 11 years
yeah,
old.
no. I don't know if I'd go out with somebody 11 years older than me now. It's a lot different. So was he good to the kids?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. He was stern, but good. He was a disciplinarian, and he would tell me things that he wanted the kids to get done that day. For instance, Tom used to have to wash cars. Well, I'd wash the car because Tom was doing everything I wanted him to do. Tom was getting straight A's in everything. I mean, he was doing everything I expected of him. And Tony was supposed to sweep the driveway, see. Well, she did it several times, but I'd help out too.
And why would you help her out? Was she doing everything?
Oh yeah, Tony was a good kid.
So,
But there was an animosity between Tony and Tom. I had the cheapest car that you could buy. It was a Ford stick shift, see. In fact, one kid over at Alamo Heights told Tom, he said, your mother sure has a, I don't know whether he used the word tacky or a crummy, the crummiest car or something like that. But anyhow, Ruby told me. Ruby was the girl that used to work for us, you know. She said, you know, Miss Duncan, she said, Tom makes Tony get in the back seat. He would drive her to school, but he'd make her get in the back seat.
well, now when did y'all move back down to San Antonio? Was that after Chicago or did it
Yeah, after Chicago. We were up in Chicago, and Everett always wanted to practice in Houston. And so we went down to Houston to look for office space. And besides, you see, a dermatologist needs an x-ray machine. Well, they weren't even making x-ray machines yet. That's why he went to be with Finrod when he got out of service, because there was no use going any place to practice because he couldn't buy himself a machine. But anyhow, so we went over to Houston, and I've forgotten the name of the Ticky Tacky Hotel that we stayed in over there, but anyhow, one of the big hotels, and it was on its last legs, and the ceiling fan didn't work, and nothing worked, and finally, we were coming over here to San Antonio to my cousin's wedding, Mildred Holiday, and when we looked up the deal on dermatologists in Houston, it was overcrowded with them. I don't know, there were 10 or 15, which sounded like a lot to us. I'm sure they must have hundreds now, but anyhow. Came over to San Antonio, and they only had 3. So we decided this was where we were going to live.
And so when did y'all buy the house on College?
Well, Aunt Minnie and Uncle Will lived on Agarita, and through their milkman, they found a little house on Agarita to rent for us before we came, and we didn't stay there very long. We found this place and bought it.
Do you remember how much you paid for your house?
$16,000.
Wow.
Paid cash. It was paid for the day we walked in.
Huh.
But that wasn't our cash.
Whose
Homer.
cash was that?
Homer. His brother.
Uh-huh.
Homer, you know, anything we wanted we could get from Homer. And so we borrowed money from
Well,
Homer.
why did Homer have so much money?
Because he was a bachelor, and he worked in Maracaibo, Venezuela for, I've forgotten the name of the oil company, but anyhow, the government took it over. It belonged to Exxon. He worked for them all his life. And he had nothing to spend money on.
So did y'all ever pay him back, or was it just
Oh
a
yeah,
gift?
there was no legal paper, nothing signed or anything. He said, when you get it, there was no interest. Yeah, that's pretty nice. But anyhow, when you have some money, you just pay me. So in about 2 years, we paid him off.
And he lived downstairs then, didn't
Yeah.
he? Yeah.
And he had a nervous breakdown. He really went off the deep end.
Well, how'd that happen?
Oh, I don't know.
Living down that little room?
No. He just had problems. He had very, very high blood pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was hitting the top of his head. Well, I mean, I really mean that. They hospitalized him several times where they thought it was just going to pop open. And then when he passed on, he lived in a hotel downtown. What's the name of it? I think it's been torn down, the Blue Bell or Blue Bonnet or something. I don't know the name of it, but anyhow, there was an old lady that lived on his floor. And she befriended him, and he would take her out to dinner every evening, and they would eat at very simple places like Luby's and that sort of thing, and then he'd take her for a ride. So she called us this one evening, and she told us, and he had a television set, and she didn't have one. And she said, your brother is very, very sick. She said, I think you should come right away. So we get in the car and we start down there, and we get stopped by the police because they were driving faster than he ever has driven. And we called and told them to take him to the Nix hospital because he was under the care of a doctor who worked out of the Nix. So we get to the Nix, and they haven't heard tied in their hair of Homer Duncan. And the reason they hadn't was that he was DOA, in other words, dead on arrival. And so when the ambulance picked him up at this hotel, they knew not to take the body to the Nix. They didn't have an emergency room, so they took him to the Baptist hospital. And he had passed away.
So, tell me some stories about Mama when she was growing up. Was she a good kid?
Oh, she was a good kid. Yeah, Toady was popular all the time. People liked Toady. And I still think Toady is inherently as smart or smarter than Tom Duncan, although she didn't get the grades. Because what she got from osmosis, you know, just came to her.
And so let's see, what else can I ask you about Mama and growing up here? And when did you meet Dr. and Miss Nisbet?
Oh, we knew him through the years. I can't tell you any particular time that we met.
But you knew from here, not New Orleans or anything?
Oh, no.
No,
They were from here. And we used to go out to their place out Green Mountain Road. They had a ranch out there. That was the ranch that was divided. Well, the cement company bought the other half of it. And we used to go out there uninvited, you know. You were always welcome there, and we'd bring some meat or something like that out there, and we'd eat together and drink. And Helen and I started traveling together later on.
So, Grandpa died of leukemia?
Yeah.
When did he die?
Huh?
When did he die?
He died in 1971, February the 8th, 1971. And the bad thing about it was he knew he had it. In other words, he knew he had it for 8 years. He knew he was going to die. He just didn't know when. Which is very hard. And he knew too much about it. You know, it's better, ignorance is bliss sometimes. If you don't know too much about it, you don't have a whole lot to worry about. But he was 62 and a half when he died. And they would keep me on tenterhooks, they'd say. About every 3 or 4 months, Dr. Jackson would say, well, why don't you take him on over to Houston, you know, to the place over there. Doctors like to share their responsibility. In other words, what can you do? You just can't stand around and wring your hands and say, oh my God, this man has leukemia, there's nothing I can do for him. But,
So how did you get on with Easter seals?
well, Darlene Furman was on their board, and she gave it up and asked me if I wanted to be on. I said yes, and I started it and I liked it.
What all did you have to do for it?
Nothing, just attend the board meetings and go to the state and national meetings.
And Darlene Furman lived catty corner across the street from y'all?
Yeah.
And she had hop, skip, and
Not Jump.
not jump. Jump was the dog's name. I heard about that.
Deborah was her sister. I always forgot that Darlene had a girl. She was an afterthought. Well, don't you think we've done enough for today?
Well, I guess so. Do you have anything else you want to tell me? Any good little stories about your travels or anything?
Oh, I don't have any good stories about my travels.
Well, where haven't you been in the world?
I have not been to South Africa, and I have not been to Sri Lanka, the bottom tip of India.
So, but you've been everywhere else, though.
I've been mostly everywhere else. And somebody asked me the other day, how come you're not going on any more trips? And I said, well, I hate to say this, but I get all these ads and everything, and I'll say, I've been there, I've been there, I've been there. And I really don't know why. I wouldn't mind going back to Copenhagen.
Mm-hmm.
I would like that place.
Well, why don't you go back?
Oh, well, you have to find somebody to go with you, too. You know, you don't just dangle yourself out by yourself.
And why do you want to go back there?
Well, it just appealed to me. I just like the people and everything.
Okay, well, let's see. I guess that's about it. Do I want to ask you anything else?
That thing doesn't make any noise, does it?
No, but it's taping. Doesn't make too much noise. Okay. Well, as soon as you think of some other stories, you can come back and finish the tape.
Okay, one of these days.
Let's see.
There it is, there it is.
There it is. Okay, tell me the tale.
Okay, I was going to tell Kim the story of this pin. This was the last present that Everett ever gave me. But anyhow, I lost it. And I thought, well, I'll put an ad in the paper. So, dumb me, I put an ad in the paper and told that I had lost this thing, and I got a telephone call. Obviously a black man's voice. And he said he had found my pin. And would I meet him down such and such a place on the east side? There was a bar or something down there. And he would meet me and bring me the pin. So I wasn't that stupid. I called the Alamo Heights police, and I told them the story, and I said I'd be glad to pay an officer to go down there with me. And they said, well, we'll call you back. So they called back and they said, there's no bar there at that address. There's nothing there at that address. So the man was just snookering me. I mean, he was trying to draw me down there. So I was very sorry that I couldn't try to get my pin back, but it certainly wasn't worth that kind of a deal. So time went by, several weeks. I found it in the ivy next to my car at the carport at my house.
Wow.
Man never had that. So don't ever advertise in a public place.
So, did you get to pick it out, or did Grandpa pick it out for you?
Oh, I picked it out. I bought it at Frost Brothers. It's 18 karat gold. It's quite heavy.
It is heavy. I'm trying to see how this little fish is on a spring or something. It's kind of
And
neat.
you've got to turn that thing off.
Okay, I'll turn it off. Okay, here we go. Oops, where's the off button?